After winter break, the most popular girl started taking photos of every adult man at school. When I found her hiding behind the football field, she whispered, "My father isn't who you think he is, and tomorrow everyone will know what he's been doing in our basement for 5 years." Then she ran into the woods. That was the moment I realized Harper's breakdown wasn't mental illness. It was someone who'd discovered evidence of crimes and didn't know how to report it safely. What she didn't know was that she'd just confided in someone with the professional expertise to help her expose the truth and destroy the man who'd been terrorizing her. I'm Marcus Blake, and I'm not just another high school student. I'm 17, but I've been working part-time for my uncle's private investigation firm since I was 15. Digital forensics, evidence preservation, witness protection protocols. Most kids my age are worried about prom. I spend weekends learning how to build cases that send criminals to prison for decades. Harper Daniels had been the untouchable queen of our school until she returned from winter break, looking like she'd seen a ghost. The girl with 20,000 Instagram followers, the quarterback boyfriend, and the perfect GPA had suddenly started acting like someone running from a predator. Now I understood why. When Harper disappeared into those woods, my first instinct wasn't to call her parents or the school. It was to secure the scene and document everything before evidence could be tampered with. 3 years of working with my uncle had taught me that the first 24 hours after a disclosure determine whether victims get justice or criminals get away with their crimes. I pulled out my phone and started recording a voice memo, documenting the exact time, weather conditions, and Harper's precise words. Then I photographed the shed from multiple angles, including tire tracks in the mud and footprints leading toward the tree line. If this became a criminal case, every detail would matter. The most important thing my uncle had taught me was that emotional reactions solve nothing. Evidence solves everything. And Harper had just handed me the beginning of what sounded like a major criminal investigation. I spent the next hour methodically documenting everything I could remember about Harper's behavior since winter break. The photos of adult men weren't random paranoia. They were a victim trying to identify potential threats or document suspicious behavior. The missing persons posters in her locker weren't signs of mental illness. They were research into cases that might be connected to whatever she'd discovered. By the time I got home that night, I had 17 pages of notes organized chronologically. Harper's behavioral changes weren't erratic. They followed a clear pattern of someone who'd made a horrific discovery and was trying to gather evidence while living with her abuser. My uncle, Detective Ray Blake, had been with the state police for 22 years before starting his private firm. He specialized in cold cases and corporate investigations, but he'd taught me that the fundamentals were the same whether you're tracking missing persons or uncovering financial fraud. Follow the evidence, document everything, and never trust initial appearances. When I showed him my notes about Harper, his expression turned serious immediately. "Marcus, this isn't a school project. If you're right about what you think you heard, this girl is in immediate danger, and we need to involve law enforcement tonight." We spent 2 hours going through my documentation, while Uncle Ray made strategic calls to contacts in Child Protective Services and the local police department. He explained that my testimony alone wouldn't be enough for search warrants, but it could trigger Protective Services investigations that might uncover additional evidence. "The first thing you need to understand," Uncle Ray told me as he made copies of everything, "is that family abuse cases are the hardest to prosecute because victims often can't or won't testify against their abusers. If Harper's father is as dangerous as she suggested, she's probably terrified of the consequences of speaking up." That's when I realized Harper's disappearance might not be running away. It might be going into hiding until she could figure out how to survive, reporting her own father for serious crimes. Uncle Ray had connections throughout the state's criminal justice system from his years as a detective. Within an hour, he'd arranged for Detective Patricia Reeves from the county's Special Victims Unit to meet with us the next morning. Detective Reeves specialized in cases involving family violence and had a reputation for protecting witnesses while building strong cases. "Your documentation is excellent," Uncle Ray said as he organized my notes into evidence files. "But we need to find Harper before her father realizes she's disclosed anything. If he's as dangerous as she indicated, he might take drastic action to silence her." The next morning, Detective Reeves reviewed my documentation with the systematic approach I'd learned to recognize in experienced investigators. She asked specific questions about Harper's behavioral timeline, the exact wording of her disclosure, and whether I'd observed any physical evidence of abuse. The behavior pattern you've documented is consistent with someone who discovered evidence of serious crimes, Detective Reeves confirmed. The photos of adult men suggest she was trying to identify potential accomplices or document suspicious interactions. The missing persons research indicates she might have connected her father to other cases. Detective Reeves explained that Harper's disclosure triggered mandatory reporting requirements, but also created a dangerous situation. If her father suspected she'd talked to anyone, he might escalate his behavior or attempt to eliminate evidence. We need to approach this strategically, Detective Reeves continued. I can initiate a welfare check, but without Harper present to confirm her statement, we're limited in what we can investigate immediately. However, your documentation gives us grounds to start gathering additional evidence. That afternoon, Detective Reeves visited Harper's house under the pretense of following up on her absence from school. She returned with concerning information. Harper's father had been evasive about her whereabouts and claimed she was staying with relatives, but refused to provide contact information. The house showed signs of recent construction activity, including fresh concrete work in the basement area. Something's definitely wrong, Detective Reeves told us. The father's behavior was consistent with someone hiding something significant. He kept trying to redirect the conversation away from Harper's location and became agitated when I asked about the construction work. Uncle Ray immediately began researching Harper's family background through his network of contacts. Within hours, he'd uncovered several concerning details. Harper's father had no listed relatives in the area where he claimed she was staying. More importantly, he'd pulled building permits for basement renovations exactly 5 years ago, matching Harper's timeline. This is starting to look like a pattern, Uncle Ray explained, as he showed me the permit records. The timing matches what Harper told you about 5 years of activity in the basement. The construction permits were for structural work that could easily conceal hidden spaces. Detective Reeves arranged for the county's computer crimes unit to analyze Harper's digital footprint. If she was researching missing persons cases, there would be electronic evidence that could help identify connections between her father and other crimes. The breakthrough came when the digital forensics team recovered Harper's browser history from cached files on the school's network. She'd been researching 5 specific missing persons cases over the past month, all involving young women who disappeared from the Tri-County area over the past 5 years. This changes everything, Detective Reeves explained when she called with the update. Harper wasn't randomly researching missing persons. She was investigating specific cases that might be connected to whatever she discovered in her basement. This suggests she found evidence linking her father to multiple crimes. Uncle Ray immediately began cross-referencing the missing persons cases with Harper's father's business travel records, which he could access through his network of corporate investigation contacts. The correlation was chilling. Harper's father had business trips to areas where 3 of the missing women were last seen, all occurring within weeks of their disappearances. We're not just dealing with family abuse, Uncle Ray realized as the connections became clear. If Harper's research is accurate, her father might be connected to several unsolved disappearances. That would explain why she was so terrified and why she mentioned 5 years of basement activity. Detective Reeves fast-tracked applications for search warrants based on the accumulating evidence. Meanwhile, I continued documenting everything we discovered, building a comprehensive case file that could support multiple charges if our suspicions were confirmed. The most crucial piece of evidence came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Eleanor Hoffman, Harper's next-door neighbor, contacted Detective Reeves after seeing news coverage about Harper being missing. She'd been hearing strange noises from the Harper house for months, including sounds that seemed to come from underground areas late at night. I kept hearing what sounded like construction work in the basement, but at odd hours, Mrs. Hoffman explained when we interviewed her. Drilling, concrete mixing, even what sounded like metal being installed. I assumed they were doing renovations, but it always happened between midnight and 4 a.m. Mrs. Hoffman also recalled seeing delivery trucks bringing construction materials to the Harper house repeatedly over the past year, including soundproofing equipment and industrial-grade materials that seemed excessive for normal home improvements. Uncle Ray immediately recognized the significance of soundproofing materials being delivered to a house where someone was allegedly keeping victims in basement areas. Combined with Harper's 5-year timeline and her research into missing persons, the evidence was building towards something far more serious than family abuse. Detective Reeves obtained warrants to search the Harper property and analyze materials from the construction deliveries. She also arranged for specialized forensic equipment that could detect hidden spaces behind walls and unusual chemical signatures that might indicate human remains. If Harper's father is connected to the missing persons cases she was researching, Detective Reeves explained, the physical evidence in that basement could solve multiple cold cases. But we need to proceed carefully, because this level of criminal activity suggests someone who's very dangerous and potentially desperate. The forensic search began at dawn on a Thursday morning. I wasn't allowed on the property, but Uncle Ray maintained contact with Detective Reeves throughout the day as evidence was collected and analyzed. The results exceeded our worst expectations. Behind a false wall in the basement, investigators found a concealed room equipped with restraints, soundproofing, and evidence of long-term human captivity. DNA samples recovered from the space matched 2 of the missing women Harper had been researching. Harper was right, Detective Reeves called to tell us that evening. Her father had been using that basement room to hold victims for extended periods. The forensic evidence suggests this had been going on for years, exactly matching her 5-year timeline. Harper's father was arrested within hours on charges of kidnapping, false imprisonment, and murder. His bail was set at $2.5 million after prosecutors argued he was a flight risk with offshore financial accounts and property in non-extradition countries. But Harper herself remained missing, and finding her became the investigation's top priority. If she'd been hiding because she was afraid of her father's retaliation, she might not know it was safe to come forward now that he was in custody. Uncle Ray coordinated with Detective Reeves to launch a comprehensive search for Harper, using both official law enforcement resources and his private investigation network. They distributed her information to women's shelters, victim advocacy organizations, and safe houses throughout the region. The breakthrough came when a counselor at a domestic violence shelter, 3 counties away, recognized Harper's photo from the missing person alerts. Harper had been staying there under a false name, too terrified to contact anyone because she believed her father would kill her if he discovered her location. She's been in protective custody this entire time, Detective Reeves explained when she called with the update. The shelter staff has been helping her document her memories and preserve any evidence she might have, but she was afraid to come forward until she knew her father couldn't retaliate. When Harper finally returned to give her official statement, she brought journals she'd been keeping since discovering the basement room during winter break. Her documentation was meticulous, including dates, times, and descriptions of evidence she'd found before her father realized she knew about his crimes. Harper found that room by accident when she was looking for Christmas decorations, Detective Reeves explained after interviewing her. What she discovered there made her realize her father was responsible for the missing women she'd been seeing on news reports. She started researching the cases to understand the scope of his crimes. Harper's evidence included photographs she'd secretly taken of the basement room before her father concealed it more thoroughly, audio recordings of suspicious late-night activities, and detailed observations about her father's behavior, changes around the times when women had disappeared. The prosecution's case was overwhelming. Physical evidence from the basement, Harper's documentation, testimony from neighbors about suspicious activities, and connections to multiple missing persons cases created an airtight argument for multiple life sentences. Harper's father attempted to negotiate a plea bargain, but prosecutors refused any deal that involved less than life in prison without parole. The evidence Harper had collected, combined with the forensic findings, was too strong to require any compromises. When the final verdicts came in, Harper's father was convicted on 7 counts of first-degree murder, multiple counts of kidnapping and false imprisonment, and charges related to concealing evidence. The judge sentenced him to consecutive life terms, ensuring he would never be eligible for release. Harper testified via closed-circuit television to protect her from additional trauma. But her impact statement was devastating. She described living in terror for months after discovering her father's crimes, knowing she had to gather evidence but afraid that any mistake would make her his next victim. The worst part wasn't finding out what he'd done, Harper said during her testimony. It was continuing to live in the same house with him while I tried to figure out how to report it safely. Every day I wondered if he suspected what I knew and whether I would survive long enough to get help. The case resulted in convictions that solved 5 cold cases involving missing women. Harper's systematic research and evidence collection had provided law enforcement with connections they'd never been able to establish through traditional investigations. Detective Reeves credited Harper's courage and my documentation with making the difference between speculation and prosecutable evidence. Without Harper's willingness to research those missing persons cases and Marcus's professional approach to preserving evidence, we might never have uncovered the full scope of these crimes. Uncle Ray used the case as an example in his training seminars for other private investigators, demonstrating how proper evidence documentation and systematic analysis could support law enforcement efforts to solve complex crimes. Harper received a settlement of $2.3 million from her father's seized assets, which she used to establish a foundation supporting victims of family violence. She also testified before the state legislature about gaps in mandatory reporting systems that allow dangerous family members to operate undetected. Today, Harper works as a victim advocate while finishing her psychology degree. She's helped dozens of families navigate the process of reporting dangerous relatives and has become a national speaker on recognizing signs of family-based criminal activity. The foundation Harper established has funded investigation training for school counselors, law enforcement officers, and social workers. Her work has directly contributed to identifying and prosecuting family abusers in 17 additional cases over the past 3 years. Uncle Ray expanded his firm's services to include family protection cases, and I'm now studying criminal justice with plans to specialize in cases involving family violence. The Harper case taught me that professional investigative skills can make the difference between victims escaping their situations and remaining trapped by dangerous family members. Harper's basement research had uncovered a serial killer who'd been operating undetected for 5 years because no one suspected a respected businessman and father. Her courage to document evidence despite enormous personal risk had stopped him from claiming additional victims and brought justice to families who'd been searching for answers. The case established new protocols for investigating family-based criminal activity, including mandatory cross-referencing of missing persons cases with basement construction permits and enhanced training for recognizing signs that family violence might involve broader criminal enterprises. Harper's father died in prison 2 years after his conviction, but not before Harper had the satisfaction of knowing her evidence had prevented him from ever harming anyone again. Her foundation continues growing, funded by speaking engagements and donations from families she's helped escape similar situations. The most important lesson from Harper's case was that victims of family violence often possess crucial evidence that law enforcement needs to solve broader criminal enterprises. When that evidence is properly documented and preserved, it can expose criminals who've been operating undetected for years while hiding behind the respectability of family life.